Hi, I'm Sara Barth, Executive Director of Semper Virens Fund. Welcome to our latest edition of Under the Redwoods, our webinar series in which we discuss all things redwood, the beauty, science, benefits, spirituality of redwood forests. As we often do, Semper Virens Fund acknowledges that the redwood forests of the Santa Cruz Mountains, in which we do our conservation work, were among the ancestral lands of many indigenous peoples in this region, people who cared for these lands for millennia until they were forcibly removed. And so it is our privilege and it is with great gratitude that we work with some of their descendants, in particular the Ama Mutsun tribal band and the Muwekma Ohlone, to help them restore their cultural and traditional relationships to this amazing landscape within which we work. Many of you have joined us already for prior webinars, so I may be telling you what you already know, but just in case, you can ask questions through the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will take as many of those as we can and try to answer them at the end of this webinar. In addition, we are recording this and we'll rebroadcast it on our website if you have to leave early or if you want to share this with other people. Thanks again to those of you who tried to join us for last month's webinar with Suzanne Simard. She had to cancel at the last minute due to a family emergency, but I'm delighted to report that we have a new date for that webinar, which will be September 14th, 2021. We'll be putting out announcements about that, but we look forward to having you join us, and it gives you more time between now and then to read her amazing book. There's a lot happening in California right now as we, as a state, work to respond to the ravages of climate change, last year's wildfires, this year's wildfires, drought, and work to try to reduce the likelihood of those things going forward. And so it's with great pleasure that I report that Governor Newsom recently signed a budget that includes some really important funding for redwood recovery and state parks in particular, and in particular our favorite state park, Big Basin. That's exciting news. Unfortunately, there's less money in there than we would have liked for wildfire recovery and forest resilience, the things that are going to be important to ensuring these forests and forests throughout the state are protected into the future. So we encourage all of you to be in touch with your state legislators and encourage them to provide adequate funding for these important efforts. That is one way that I think California can lead the way for the rest of the nation, is really investing in wildfire recovery and forest resilience. There are many ways that California has been leading innovator in conservation. That's just one. And thinking about that is one of the reasons we invited our guest today. I'm joined today, and he's actually here in the room with me, with Doug McConnell, who has been a communicator around conservation issues for 40 plus years? 50 plus years. Doug, if you live in this region, you've probably seen him on television in Bay Area Backroads or his Open Roads program on television. Semper Virens Fund recently just did a television program with him, which you can find on our website and on his Open Roads website. Doug is one of my heroes because he effectively communicates and educates with people about really complex conservation issues and about some of the natural wonders of our region. So it is just a delight to have him here with me today. And, you know, we're in some really turbulent and unsettling times in the region, in the state, arguably globally. And so it's a really good, I'm really glad we're doing this webinar to take a moment, take a deep breath and sort of think retrospectively about what we've learned about conservation and social movements and where we're going prospectively. And so, Doug, your 50 years of experience is incredibly helpful right now. So with that, welcome, Doug.
Sure. It's so great to be with you too, and to be with your wonderful organization and all that you guys do. I've been a big fan for a long time. I'm also a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
And of course, the legacy of the Semper Virens Fund, the club, the history, all of that we talk about. And yeah, no, we're living in interesting times, I guess, to say the least. We had today the the testimony on the January 6th, insurrection. We have the pandemic, we have the drought, we have the fires, all the things that are climate change, all the things you mentioned. And yet I think I think these are the times that can also cause us to rise to find the best within ourselves. And I always feel that the Bay Area is one of the great leaders in doing exactly that, in conservation and in other ways. So, and Semper Virens Fund has been a big part of it for 120 plus years. So, anyway, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. And let's start with that issue of why the Bay Area or California writ large has been a leader on so many things. Why do you think that is?
Obviously it's a great question. And, I think, first of all, we live in this naturally rich, magnificent, beautiful region, ecologically diverse. And we live on land, as you mentioned in the preliminary part, that, these are native people's lands. The Yamamuts and the Ohlone, and so many others in the Bay Area in Northern California who lived here so well and so sustainably for thousands upon thousands of years, and we have lessons to be learned from them. Yeah. And so, when we came after the gold rush, the world rushed in to the Bay Area. So it was all these cultures, it was all these ideas, it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. But it was a time of invention. And it was also, among those who came, were people who came with a sense of a commitment to education, to science. So the California Academy of Sciences was established, I think, 1852 or 1853. Yep. Stanford University early on. University of California, 1868. People like John Muir came in 1868 as well. And so the early seeds of conservation and protection and innovation began to emerge here as it was defined back in the 19th century. And of course, it's evolved over time. But, so we had the national park system kind of in many ways, was born here. Yeah. And Sequoia and Yosemite, our second and third national parks, 1890. Semper Virens Fund, Semper Virens Club, creating Big Basin in 1902. All those were important seeds that began to lay the framework for what then became in the 20th century, in the 21st, sort of a seedbed of innovation that in our DNA was this belief in creating lives that had respect and protection of nature as part of it. And then we've kind of learned and grown, and I think we're applying, some of those long lessons to the world we find ourselves in now. Yeah, and it's interesting that innovation and sense of adventure and maybe disruption, as the tech world would like to talk about it, continues to this day, obviously with Silicon Valley. But I just was reading about an Olympian from this region who's a mountain biker, and in talking about her, they were reminding everyone that sport was largely born here in the Bay Area on Mount Tam. So you see that sense of innovation really permeating in lots of different avenues. No, you really do, and that's a great example. I live in Marin, and so the birthplace of mountain biking, and to see that. Just parenthetically, by the way, I also lived in Alaska for a long time, and I was really pleased when the wonderful swimmer from Seward, Alaska, won the gold medal in the Olympics last night. Yeah, Seward is not exactly the swimming capital of the world. No, but that's some vigorous ocean waters that she would have been practicing in. So it's bracing. Bracing. Well, I'm interested as we think about innovation. We're going to talk about prospectively where you see things going, but just for a moment thinking retrospectively, what are some of the innovations you've seen, particularly around conservation, either statewide in California or in the Bay Area, that you think have been most impactful? And maybe in particular, there's some really obvious ones, but I'm curious if there's anything you think is not heralded as much as it should be, but perhaps in your mind and your observations has really been transformative. I think the great post-World War II story of conservation in the Bay Area is, to me, tremendously inspiring. And we can talk about that as we go on along here. Why do I have hope for the future? It's in part because I've seen it in my lifetime against all odds. And so even though we have these early seeds of conservation, there's a couple maybe I'll mention in response to this. It was really that post-war battle by battle, place by place, vision by vision that has led to now the greatest urban conservation legacy of any major urban region on Earth, right in the Bay Area, with much more to go. So we have many of the building blocks that I've had a chance to witness in my lifetime, and some just before. So when I think about this sort of thing, I mean, I do think, for against Central Byron's Club, 1902, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
It created essentially our modern state park system.
Yeah.
And I'm an honorary state park ranger, so Central Byron's and Big Basin is near and dear to my heart. I had the pleasure to kind of help MC the 100th anniversary of Big Basin back in 2002, and it was just very touching to me to be there at that place. But other experiences and inventions here. One of the most inspiring to me is the creation of the East Bay Regional Park District.
Yeah.
So it's the heart of the Depression. Quickly, the story and these dates are, I think, pretty accurate. 1934, a plan has been created by the Olmsted firm. Frederick Olmsted's son was the leading designer of this. They had been contracted by the powers that be in the Bay Area, but particularly Robert Strowl and people in Alameda County, University of California, to come up with a vision for what the Bay Area could look like what it could become in the 20th century as a growing megalopolis. And so, true to form, they came back with this idea that had lots of green spaces and parks, and great cities need great parks, great access to nature, all these things integrated as the Olmsteds would do. And so in 1934, Robert Strowl and folks in Alameda County who had some power said, well, this is a great idea. Yes, the Depression, but let's go ahead and ask the voters if they're willing to tax themselves to create what will be the first regional park district ever created. And so they took that crazy big idea in the Depression and went to the voters, and the voters, in one of the most inspirational votes I can think of, said, yes, we're going to bet on the future. We're going to invest for our children and our future. And even though we don't have much these days, we're going to make sure that this happens. So the East Bay Regional Park District is born. First 3 parks are opened in 1936. And now, however many years that is, not quite 90 years later, we have 120,000+ acres, 73 regional parks, the largest system of its kind, and one of the most visited places in California when you take all the parks together. That was a huge planting of the seed that then spread to Contra Costa County, and then helped to influence all these other things. If I have a couple seconds,
go.
No, two things that really jump out at me, and of course, going back to the notion of the national park idea. For however limited that was initially in its vision, and I think we're growing it and enriching it and expanding and making what national parks are more valuable than ever in our time. The creation of our national park idea, in many ways born right here. University of California played a significant role. Mather, first director of the state park, national parks, was University of California, and Albright as assistant. So John Muir and etc. Well, that was born here. And then 50 years ago, next year, was the birth of the first national park right where people live, right in the heart of an urban area. The creation of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which will turn 50 next year, along with the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District turns 50 next year, another organization and legacy to salute. But, you look at that, from the 1890s to the 1970s, that system expanding and the birth for those ideas were right here in the Bay Area. It's extended, throughout the nation, throughout the world in many ways. So those are some, but they're the little battles that often don't get heralded, that were the building blocks to make that happen. And where I live in Marin, the saving of Richardson Bay, the Richardson Bay Audubon Sanctuary, was saved from being filled in, and in about 1958. And there was a battle, save. You can go to the Audubon Sanctuary now and enjoy this magnificent location that would have been 1,000 acres of homes.
Yeah.
But it's a battle like that to build the building blocks to create this legacy.
You've been talking a lot about land, which of course is near and dear to my heart and to the organization's heart. Thinking about where we need to be going forward with conservation and what the opportunities are, I'm just struck listening to you. One of the things that's being discussed quite a bit here in the Bay Area, in the state, and beyond is this concept of 30 by 30, protect 30% of the land base by 2030, and some are aspiring to protecting 50% of the land base by 2050. I think this is an idea first put forward by the famous ant scientist, E.O. Wilson, another hero of mine who I'm less likely to be able to meet. But that's being discussed very aggressively and ambitiously, I think, by our governor and associated agencies. Here in the Bay Area and in the Santa Cruz Mountains in particular, we're not quite at 30%, but we're probably farther along than many parts of the world. And yet we're increasingly understanding that 30% isn't quite enough. Really, it should be 50%. I see that in the attention that this is bringing, the discussion around 30% of the land base protected by 2030. I see that as an incredible opportunity going forward to remind people of what's been protected and what is yet to be protected if we don't act. That's one of the things I see as an opportunity going forward, but I'm curious what's on your radar screen, or if you agree even with that.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the last couple of years here of these tremendous challenges of, I think Mother Nature has been just trying to talk to us too.
Yeah.
And finally said, no, I'm going to have to raise my voice here.
Yeah.
These fires, this drought, the pandemic.
Yeah.
Invading habitats all over the world. I mean, this has been we're living in the midst of an immense, I hope, teaching moment.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm so, and I know, we've got a long way to go, and I know we're imperfect and so forth, but I do believe in my heart, my love for the Bay Area, that this is the place where that kind of Silicon Valley of innovation for conservation, restoration, restoring our relationship to nature, basically a fundamental cultural shift.
Yeah.
It really has to happen. We have to go back to all of our Indigenous people and the wisdom that they knew and practiced for thousands upon thousands of years and still embedded in their cultures. We have to take that and we have to apply that at scale now, and to use we're going to have to combat climate change in many ways. We're going to have to create new technologies and ways to move around and all these other things. But the great news is we have nature here as our pre-existing ancient technology that we can deploy at scale.
Yeah. Right
now, if we have the vision, if we have the will, if we have the wisdom to do it, and the great news about the Bay Area and California more broadly, but the Bay Area especially, is we're well underway on that. And I think that many of us, through all this, these decades and generations of learning and expanding and enriching our understanding of, well, why are parks important? Why are open spaces important? Why are ecosystems? Why are they important? I think that we are in a place now where we're poised to take that 2030 or 2050 a vision and say, let's do it. It's the same, in a way, it's bigger than, of course, but it's the same mentality that caused the East Bay Regional Park District to be born in a depression. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. These are the worst of times in some ways. Well, let's make them the best of times. And we know some of the things that can make it happen. And I think that we're in a place, and we're sort of with great groups like yours working collaboratively, sort of like conservation without borders. Yeah. And it's action without walls, sort of thing. I'm just glad to be alive in a time where I can maybe see this as possibly, maybe live long enough to see more of it be attained and to play a little role in trying to kind of help move those ideas forward. You covered a lot of different things in that answer, which was great. So cut me off. No, not at all. But I want to hone in on one piece in particular that I think is both an opportunity and something I've been really thinking a lot about, and that is the role of Indigenous peoples in conservation going forward. We are increasingly understanding from the archaeological record the active role that they played stewarding this landscape and throughout California to maintain forests that were resilient and healthy
that obviously got very disrupted and interrupted with the arrival of Europeans. I guess my question is, and I will also observe, we work very closely in particular with the Amamutsan tribe and their tribal chairman, Val Lopez. You know, when I speak to him about his relationship and his thinking about environmental protection and restoration efforts, it's such a different and more holistic and deeper mindset, even than somebody like me who's spent 30 plus years educating herself and working in land conservation. I just realize how much there is to be learned. I see Indigenous voices increasingly being given a greater role in stewardship of the landscape, or at least the one in which I work. We still, I think, have a ways to go. And I just wonder, you've probably seen many efforts involving tribes, and just wanted to get your sense of where we've come and where there may be opportunities for continued or deeper re-engagement of those people.
I don't think there's, of the many important things for us to be doing, that's really essential and at the heart of a whole lot of it. You know, we come from a, you know, broadly speaking, we have not many cultures. We are, you know, the Bay Area is comprised of the world, right?
Yeah.
And but we collectively are trying to learn our way back towards nature, and we need to talk to those and engage those who were always there. And so that wisdom is deep. And I've also known Val and filmed with him a number of times at, you know, the return of the Amamutsan to Mount Amanum, sacred mountain, after 250 years of exclusion. To me, it's very powerful, very moving. The work over in Curiosity, over here, you know, with the tribal members and restore, and just so and up on the North Coast, you know, filmed the story with the Kashaya Pomo band, and you know, having a chance to return to the coast, to now, you know, coastal property that they will be managing in collaboration with Sonoma County Parks and others, and interpreting these places. So we need to do more and more and more and more of that. And I think the light bulbs have at long last, you know, gone on. And I think we need to really follow that light and follow that wisdom, and work together and partner. We're going to need all the wisdom, all the insight, all the sense of the future. You know, it's not, you know, we tend to be a short-term culture. You know, how is my company doing this quarter? Television, how are my ratings last night? But we have to be looking out, of course, for generations and generations, and getting into that mindset, and then having our strategies to a very large extent be nature-based. And that means we have to understand nature, we have to feel it, we have to, and we have things to bring to the table with our science and wisdom, and so much of it we have here, thanks to these incredible educational institutions right literally in our backyard.
Yeah. One of the things I find most inspiring about working with Chairman Lopez is he does take that very long perspective. So he talks about, you know, multiple generations and his ancestors. He sees a direct tie. And I think despite having been through some extreme disruption to his people and to landscapes that are of deep importance to his community, he doesn't give up hope. He's continually working for, you know, ways to reconnect his people with the landscape, restore the landscape, restore the birds and other creatures that have been extirpated from the landscape. And I'm curious how you, as somebody who's worked and observed conservation efforts for quite a long time, how do you maintain hope? It can feel a little overwhelming at times when you think in particular about the threats posed by climate change. They can be a little overwhelming. So how do you think about that with some historical perspective to inform you?
Well, I don't have the thousands of years. Unfortunately, and I hope that thousands of years from now, you know, those of us those who then have the interviews can really, you know, reference that meaningfully. You know, as Val does, and I completely agree with this. I've always been so taken and so moved. I've worked in lots of different and with lots of different tribes and native peoples, here in North America, Alaska for many years, and so forth. And I've always been moved by that, by the connection to the land, with the sense of possibility and hope if we get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's a whole story. I won't go there right now, but so I do derive hope from their hope. And I remember going to Mount with Chairman Lopez, and he's, showing why is this so important? He's talking about the importance of this to his people, but to us.
Yeah.
He wants us, it's not about, come join us, come learn from us, come share with us. And I think that welcoming is so profoundly important. But, I just, I've always been a student of history, and now I've lived long enough to have experienced some history. And, in my history, so I was born in 1945, put the cards on the table here. And I was literally born the day that Hitler got rid of himself. And so I think my mom said, okay,
a momentous day.
A moment, yeah. So I mean, my entire life is this post-war world that we're, living in many ways, people of our color and, middle class have certainly benefited from. But if you and I had been old enough to have had a conversation in 1945, long before you were born, and said, well, okay, California is growing. There's about 9 million people when I was born. It's about almost 40 million people now.
Yeah.
9 million in the whole state. That's not much more than lives here in the Bay Area and some contiguous counties. So, and progress was the most important product. And I was literally born in Southern California. My family had come to Northern California in the 1870s, but when I was born, we're down in Southern California. We kind of migrated back north as I was growing up. But I watched Southern California, and by the time I was 10, the things I had loved and known, streams and creeks and things, were just paved over. They were gone. And there wasn't the commitment to parks, open space, nature, and that culture that there was in this culture in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But even if we talked and said, okay, what's the future of the Bay Area going to be? I don't think I would have had the wisdom or the nerve to bet that by the 1970s, it wasn't all going to be paved over.
Yeah.
Or the Bay was not going to be filled. But I lived through that. I got to see that. I got to see that save the Bay.
Yeah.
And Sylvia and Esther and Kay Kerr and others, literally saving the Bay from being filled in against all odds. And then the evolution of the East Bay Park District and the GGNRA and Midpen and
Save Mount Diablo.
Save Mount Diablo. Save Mount Diablo turns 50 this year. I mean, just we can go on. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Bit by bit, area by area, dream by dream, vision by vision, and we turn the tide. So in Marin, the comprehensive plan was by a couple of decades after World War II that 250,000 people will be living in West Marin. Well, no, now Marin is 2/3 protected. That didn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
The San Mateo coast, the same thing. The double slide thing was fought, and that coast now is a largely protected, preserved, and will grow of its own organic way into the future. That was not by accident. So I look at all these things and think we can overcome.
Yeah.
And it's within us.
So I'm curious, you've worked with lots of conservation legends and some amazing organizations. You've already referred to some, governmental and non-governmental. I'm curious, I mean, I'm happy to give you a chance to list your favorites, but I'm also really asking about what is it that you think would have been the traits or the characteristics of folks who have been transformative conservation leaders or organizations that have really made a difference well beyond their size. Is there anything we can learn?
I'm trying to learn every day. That's what I always feel as if I know just enough to be dangerous, and so my job is to go out and learn things every day. And so I'm humbled by what I don't know, but what I think I know, and I think you embody this, sir. And I think Semper Virens Fund is a classic example. I think it's. I think what I look for and find to be success models, you got to have vision.
Yeah.
And then you got to have tenacity.
Yeah.
You got to have a dream, and then you've got to pursue that dream, and you can't do it by yourself. It's a collaborative thing, just like the story we did with you this spring down in the Santa Cruz Mountains. You know, it's not just the Semper Virens Fund. It's working together. It's building bridges. It's making connections. It's creating synergy between the various capacities that everybody can bring to the table. It takes a village, or it takes a a lot to make these things happen. So it's the vision, it's the tenacity, it's the collaboration, and then it's living up to promises. Make a promise, but keep that promise.
Yeah.
And then the other part of my secret sauce, I think, is and make sure the public's involved every step of the way.
Yeah.
You know, engage, communicate, bring, talk. I'll give you one little, and so I could list a whole bunch of organizations. Yeah. And I think we're rich, thankfully rich, in an ecosystem of strong, committed, capable, heartfelt organizations in this region. It's just one of my favorite things is getting to know so many of you, and just be, I get inspired every day. Yeah. But I remember going to Alaska in 1973. I was 28 years old. I've been working on international environmental stuff, and one of my colleagues was hired to become the planning director in Ketchikan, Alaska. A town of 12,000 people, had the world's largest pulp mill. They were tearing down the Tongass forest. They wanted to build a bridge from the city across to an island where nobody lived. Later became the famous Bridge to Nowhere, if you remember that, back on the 2008 campaign, Sarah Palin and stuff. Well, they didn't want planners, but they wanted all the money that they could get from the government if they only had a comprehensive plan in their transportation plan. So they had to hire some communists, young, long-eared kids to come and do the plan for them. And we wanted to take an ecological approach to planning. We wanted to get the public involved. But had we gone in there with our vision, they would have thrown us out within about 3.5 hours. Yeah. So we went in, and I guess I went to the story only because, we engaged the public for about 2 years in this process. And what I learned from that was, in the end, even in a place that I would never have guessed when I walked in the door, the people came up with actually a plan that we couldn't have written better, to plan for the future of that town and to not build a bridge to nowhere. And it gave me that sense of, if we do this together, collaboratively do it together, and we invest in the will and the dreams and the passions of people in a positive way, all kinds of things can happen.
Yeah, I think what I've been struck by is over and over again, wherever I've worked on land conservation or other kinds of conservation, I think people inherently have a love of place. And when asked and when presented with the risk to a place that they love, they may not want to think about it at a national policy level. They may not want to vote nationally on the environment. But when it comes to their beloved places, most people are going to vote. And I don't mean voting in an electoral sense. Most of them are going to choose to protect because it means something to them. Right. So I'm not surprised to hear that about Ketchikan. One of the things I say often to my staff, and I can't come up with a better metaphor, so forgive me because it's not a great one, but, people talk about peeling an onion. I feel like our work at Semper Virens and of so many of my sister organizations is rebuilding the onion, right? Layer by layer, we're adding back on. You don't, in a landscape like this where there's heavy, population and intensive use, it's too late to go and protect 1 million acres at a time, but we can grab back and restore and protect, 1,000 acres here, 2,000 acres there. And over time, it's 50, 100, several 100,000 acres. And it does require tenacity and commitment. It requires a timeline that it goes well beyond a single human generation in that restoration effort.
I love the way you've explained that. I think that's wonderful. I couldn't possibly agree more with you. And that's part of what we're doing, I think, strategically, is that we are not just protecting land, we're restoring our relationship to land and restoring land itself. And I think there's great opportunities, talk about economic opportunities. If we invest in nature-based solutions to climate change and do it at scale, is what we're beginning to do. You guys are doing in the mountains. Others are doing, the bayshore, the restoration, Measure AA funding for bayshore restoration to restore about half of the original tidal wetlands that were bring the bay. Those are examples of work that need to, to go to scale and significantly so. But if we do it, not only do we get the benefits of a healthier natural system and our better relationships to it for everybody, not just the two of us, but for everybody, health and well-being of everybody, and there are jobs in that.
Yeah,
people can get paid.
Yeah,
and so it's I just think finding that kind of magic harmony of those things will make us feel better as people.
Yeah,
and then the other part of it, it's so wonderful to be able to play a little role in something or a big role in something. And actually see over time the results, a tree that grows or a wetland that begins to flourish or
a park that's created.
A park that's created, and children that are smiling, families that are being made just as we've learned in the pandemic. The outdoors was our salvation. Thankfully, we have these great, outdoor treasures for people to go to. And then we had all these incredible parks and open space, people working their tails off to figure out how do we do it and how do we keep them open, how do we make it safe, and to almost universally did that. I just think there's a lot to be inspired by in terms of how, among another topic, how the Bay Area responded to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And how we and nature connected to make the pandemic more survivable.
Yeah, boy, if you ever had any question about the importance of nature to people and both their physical and mental health, I think this pandemic really shone a light on that, very bright light. So, yeah, and I was pleased to see, I think our elected officials are responding to that and are reinvesting just in a parochial way in our state. I think I'm seeing reinvestment in state parks, for example, in a way that it hasn't been for a long time. So that gives me a lot of hope.
And me too. By the way, that's state parks, alone. I'm not that that's insignificant, but state parks in the broad scheme of everything else. My mom and dad were very conservative voters, and we ended up having somewhat different views politically. But
doesn't that happen with every generation?
My kids won't, because of course I'm right about it. But I was always touched as a young person. They were so proud as Californians. We had the best school system in America, and that was true. Best public school system, and we had the best non-national. We had the best state park system that you'd ever imagine, and they always voted for every bond issue to do this. And and the state parks has had its struggles over these years. Yeah, and we both care about it a lot. Right? Yeah, and so now hopefully, and maybe with the tragedy, the losses of Big Basin, and then the losses from that, as you and others and we, the people, try to create its future, it could become, I think, has the chance to help show us the way. Yeah. To more welcoming, more engaging, more ecologically, and that we hopefully inspires us to, as the voters, literally, to support our state park system as a great crown jewel system it is. Yeah, I am feeling optimistic about that. I think there's great promise for what's to come at Big Basin. One of the things you and I've talked about, and you just alluded to it, is how do we make a place like Big Basin, a park that's been basically, the facilities have been wiped off the map, for better or for worse. We're starting with a relatively blank slate in terms of the infrastructure. The forest, of course, is still there. Forest will recover on its own timeline. But one of the questions I'm going to be watching and interested in at Big Basin is, how do we make this park more welcoming and inclusive? There's been some real eye-opening stories over the last few years about people of color being hassled visiting parks, or bird watching in Central Park and having people call the police on them. Just horrible things. And yet, if you visit our parks in this region, you'll see all kinds of people from diverse backgrounds and races and ethnicities. And I'm curious, it does feel like equity and social justice, racial justice are starting to imbue more and more of the conservation effort. I know Semper Virens has really tried to be much more thoughtful and careful and contribute in this regard. We have a long way to go. And I'm curious, as you've observed this over time, what you're seeing and what you're thinking about how we're doing in the equity space.
in the conservation arena?
Well, it's a great question, and I would just say we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I do believe that, and again, speaking of this region, stay with this, this territory of ours, that we're making progress, and I know intimately how important and high on the agenda that is for each and every nonprofit, public agency, all the ecosystems of managers, and to make these are lands of, by, and for the people. They're lands for all the people. They're lands for all time. They're not, and that they need to be. You used the word for Big Basin so well, welcoming.
Yeah.
So often they have not been welcome. You're met by a guard at a gate someplace wearing a uniform, maybe a gun.
Yeah.
Well, that's not very. Y'all come in. Enjoy yourself. By the way, what are you doing? In other words, we have to create these places as being as welcoming as they were for a white kid growing up in Fresno or the Central Valley.
Yeah.
To go to Yosemite. I never thought. I thought it was my part.
Yeah.
I just went there, and the Rangers were my friends, and I got to learn. That has to be, the creation of, however we design that in the 21st century, and there's many ways of doing it. But I do see a lot that's there, and I see it. And going back to the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which we talked about early on, 50th anniversary next year.
Yeah.
First park created right where people live.
Yeah.
It was that notion that. And from the very beginning, these were meant to be parks for all, parks for the people. That was the idea. I mean, the parks for nature and everything else, but parks for the people to be in and experience history and nature and each other and build community. And that's been the guiding principle of that, and the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, the great nonprofit that has been joined at the hip of the parks for all these 40 plus years. Parks for all, forever, and I think that's. I love that slogan, and I think that really is what needs to be driving each and every one of us, and all the work we do to both promote these places, manage them, make them welcoming. And we got a ways to go.
Yeah, it strikes me just listening to you that effort, that sort of well-intentioned rhetoric around Parks for All. Yeah. It just mirrors what's happened in this country nationally with our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, which says these marvelous ideas around equality for all. But it has taken, hundreds of years for us to get to a point where it's clear that it's not for everyone. And we have to do a lot more actively to realize the words that we say. And that's been my big realization in the parks space is I think they were intended to be democratic institutions, but in actuality have not been. And that's going to require a lot of purposeful and active rethinking the stories we tell at these places, the names we give to these parks, the ways we invite people in, et cetera. So that to me is both a challenge and an opportunity I see for the conservation movement going forward.
I absolutely agree with everything you said there. That's exactly right. But again, kind of going to challenge and opportunity. I think maybe that's the theme of the era in which we're living.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to be Pollyannish, but I do think we got no choice.
Yeah.
We can't. Yeah. These can't be. We shape these lands that they could have been in other cultures. There would have been places for kings and potentates and princes, and you can't go to this beach, and and we made the coast accessible to everybody. For example. Yeah. And the parks idea, national park idea that we were saluting earlier. Yeah. Originally, it was for people. White people who could get up there and had some resources and and so forth. And we know that doesn't fulfill the vision of America at its best. And so it's challenging, but it's kind of fun. It's fun to rethink this stuff. I mean, it doesn't come cheap, but it's to reinvent appropriately. Yeah. And with all the different people involved in it, it's going to be fun. I know I'm on the advisory group for Parks California, And I know that's a big, obviously, theme of what they're working on.
Yeah.
And but we need to, all of us, and do more and more to invest in, I think, take our innovative parts of our brain and apply them to that task, and then magic can happen.
Yeah. Well, I could keep asking you many questions, but I know we want to give our audience.
Rambling on
no. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to tell you the most heartwarming conservation story I heard recently. Okay. Just briefly, because we had a webinar earlier about marbled murrelets, which are these highly endangered seabirds that nest only in old growth trees, and especially in redwoods and Doug fir. And the scientist who came on from state parks and talked about them was pretty pessimistic about whether the population in this region would survive after the fires of last year. Very pessimistic, because they had not been seen nesting in burned trees. And we just got news that there is a nesting murrelet in one of the burned old growth trees in Big Basin. Yeah. And so nature's resilient. Nature goes beyond what we think it can. Not to be Pollyannish, it's still a very endangered bird, but it made me, made my heart feel good. So I'm sharing that with you, because we could talk about, all kinds of depressing things and tough times that we're going through, but that made me feel great. So share with us something that's made you feel heartwarming or optimistic or promise for the future.
Promise for the future. Thank you for sharing that. That's great to hear. We did for our open roadshow. We had with Midpen. We were looking at murrelets earlier in the season, and how tenuous it all is.
It's tenuous,
but it's but nature's amazing, and if we give her a chance and we give her space and give her an opportunity to maneuver and do our part. It's amazing what can happen.
Yeah.
Look what's happened in the course of my lifetime about elephant seals coming down. Or even, as challenging as the future is with gray whales, or, anyway, there's condors. So there's all that. I was thinking about that, before coming. So I had a little list. A part of it of just some things that popped into me. We just did a show on our open road thing. We're preempted right now for the Olympics. We're on Sundays at 6:30 on NBC. So when the Olympics are over,
you'll be back.
Well, they'll let us back on the air for a little while. And but on the Ridge Trail, Bay Area Ridge Trail, circumnavigating the bay, goal is going to get to 550 miles.
Who would have ever thought?
1989. I got to be a part of, kind of follow it over this whole time. Deserve no credit, but I've just been following it literally, and it's hitting its 400-mile mark this year.
Wow.
I mean, that is pretty darn you. That's
building the onion.
There you are. That's exactly right. And we'll get to 550 because this is the Bay Area, and we take big audacious ideas and we make it happen. It's like we're doing with the Bay Trail on the shore of the Bay Line. Not quite 400 miles yet, but it's going to get to 500 eventually. My son Patrick, that I was talking about earlier, actually had a 16-hour bike ride day on Sunday from Richmond around down the south end, back up on the Bay Trail. Didn't ride the whole length of it, but 16 hours in the saddle, got a new appreciation.
In a highly urbanized area. It's incredible.
With nature along the way. But other things, we talked about, the 50th anniversary for Midpen coming up, and the GGNRA, the Save the Bay this year, that great nonprofit organization that grew out of the work of, the 1960 years old this year. Save Mount Diablo. All the great work that those guys do out there. They're turning 50, I think, in December. Do I have it right? Something like that.
I think that's right.
And then two people. Because I'm always inspired by you, by others. If I have time to say real quickly, during the last 5 years, especially since some person came down an escalator somewhere, I'm a news junkie. So I wake up in the morning and usually I lead depressed as heck. I mean, broadly speaking. And then I go out and do my work, and I spend time, Sara, with incredible people like you and so many others. And I come back truly at the end of all these days, inspired, hopeful. All is not doom and gloom. There's so much good work going on, unheralded, and we can build on. So anyway, and so I owe a couple of people who are heroes of mine. One of them is not an environmentalist per se, but she is a teacher and a role model and Her name is Betty Reed Sostin. She's our oldest national park ranger.
Yes.
With the Rosie the Riveter World War II
Yes.
Homefront National Historic Park in Richmond.
Yes.
We've done a documentary, had the pleasure of a lifetime to follow Betty and to tell her story. She turns 100 in September. Betty, happy birthday in September. And just last week, a man near and dear to my heart, whom I've known forever, admired forever, loved forever, and who was instrumental in helping to save the Marin and Sonoma coast, Dr. Marty Griffin, in Belvedere. Marty, happy 101st birthday.
Wow.
101st birthday last week. And we're going to have a little ice cream social with him outdoors in about a week or so. But so those great people. And then the other thing that's heartwarming to me is just how, for all the challenges and all of our flaws and everything else, basically how well my hometown, my Bay Area hometown, did in trying to deal with this pandemic.
Yeah.
How we took science seriously, and we're still taking it. We're not out of the woods on this yet. We're learning, we pay attention, we've tried to be careful and mindful of each other, and get ourselves vaccinated and do all these things. I've been so impressed by that. And I've been, also impressed by, again, as I said earlier, just how all of our parks and open space and conservation friends work so hard to keep those places open as saving graces for our health, mental, physical health.
Yeah, first responders of a different kind.
First responders. Anyway, all that warms my heart a lot.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Matt, who's going to share with us some of the questions he's been watching in the chat and in the Q&A.
Thanks so much for this. This has been just lovely. Doug, you talked about the importance of welcoming experiences in nature and at parks. How have you seen environmental groups do good work to partner with and invite in groups who are advocating for diversity in nature and seeking that safe, welcoming, and inclusive experience?
Matt, that's a great question. Thanks for that question from whoever sent it. Because there's a whole lot of examples, but I go too long. I apologize for this. A couple that jump out, and again, going back to the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, where they had the Parks for All Forever, part of their founding principles. They have created they've tried to walk that walk, and they've created, the Chrissy Field Center, literally at Chrissy Field, that has been one of these models of engagement of the public, taking kids and families from the cities and bringing them into the parks and helping them learn and become engaged and fun. So that is, that's a real model. It's actually been replicated by many others all over the place. I'm working with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and its many partners right now. We're doing a little video to help launch what will be a public planning process for the future of Coyote Valley. And that is going to be this just south of San Jose, this old California, miraculously unpaved over. Lots of reasons for that. And including hard work by so many organizations to make it happen. And now the people of San Jose and Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, have a chance to envision the future of Coyote Valley. And it's going to be, how do we care for nature, care for agriculture, care for ourselves, and do this in a holistic way to make Coyote Valley a model for what a place like that could be in the future. But the public's going to be involved. From day one, everybody, this is your valley, your place. Roll up our sleeves. We can do this together. Those are a couple of examples.
Those are great examples.
Thank you so much, Doug. Sara talked briefly about population growth and the challenge growth brings to land conservation. There's also the subsequent demand for resources, urban expansion, increased stresses on our national environment. Has this featured in conversations about environmental issues in your experience, or why hasn't it featured enough?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think in my lifetime, population growth in California has been the story in many ways.
The conservation issue.
Yeah, because and then the question is, I'm not sure I'm answering this well, but the question is then how do we deal with it? Like I said, when I was born in California 76 years ago, there were about 9 million people here. Now there are about 40 million. And Southern California, to a very large extent, and it's been turning around, thankfully. There's lots of new conservation initiatives over the past 30 years or so, but basically, that got paved over. Essentially the valleys and all the rest of it. And so, those are to me teaching lessons about how not to do something. And whereas up here, they took population. How do we deal with the exploding population of the Bay Area and make plenty of mistakes? But how do we try to undo some of those mistakes and then protect from others? So I think we have to learn. It's going to take all of our creative talent to think how best to care for and expanding so that nobody gets left behind, and so that we can care for and feed and nurture all of our people, and in a sustainable way that can that can last hopefully for thousands of years, and deal with climate change. And so, if I'm going anywhere with this, I guess I would just say, and I really do think our main road towards that future is to follow Mother Nature, and to apply everything we have learned about nature-based actions and solutions to help address these things, and to work then our infrastructure around that. If that's making any sense, I'm not sure it is.
Thank you, Doug. One last question here. I think it would be helpful to know if you've seen some examples where park agencies and park managers might already be doing a better job utilizing Indigenous practices and or phasing out some of the older, more toxic practices, maybe herbicide spraying or the like.
Yeah, I think probably when I'm driving home, I'm going to start to think about some. So usually, that's what I should have said. But responding to this, well, I think right now one of the big initiatives, obviously, is that we are finally learning, and I think we, the public, are finally accepting that we need to use fire to manage for fire, and to manage for the health and the well-being and the of nature. And the land managers, the prescribed controlled burning, low level burns that Indigenous people did here for thousands of years, as Malcolm Margolin, another treasure of California, editor of Payday Books,
Yeah.
whatever, expert on Native California history, as I came and learned about it, told me many years ago. He said, when Juan Manuel de Ayala sailed into San Francisco Bay in 1775, they thought they saw a wilderness, but what they saw was a tented garden.
Yeah.
And so I think we're learning that, and the putting on the ground of good fire is something that is inspiring me. That we are beginning to see that, and I think all of us have been through these horrific smoke and fire events, and we know that we have to use fires we can't control to eliminate and stop fires we can't, and Semper Virens. When I was filming with you guys down at the San Vicente Redwoods, I saw an exact place where that just happened.
Yeah.
Where you did controlled burn in 2019 or something like that, and when the big fire came and evaporated everything else, that area where you had burned was green and life was returning and growing, and it was a visual lesson of what putting fire on the ground is. The Native people have known forever. We're just beginning to learn, and there's much more than just fire. But that's a lesson that we are I think finally really learning.
I'll give a very specific additional example, that we were just out in the field with the Bureau of Land Management's regional manager for the Chitoni Coast Areas National Monument. They're in the process of developing a new management plan, or have just released a new management plan for that unit. And this is a conservation property, but it has incredible cultural values as well, which is why it is named Chitoni Coast Areas, after the people. Chitoni is a dialect of Ohlone language. In any case, the land manager said very proudly that unlike past practice where they would have looked across the landscape and then gone to the tribe and said, we think you have a few things worth protecting. Instead, they went to the tribe, had the tribe come onto the land, and the tribe told the federal land managers, hey, here are the things that are out there that are important. And they flipped the whole process on their head, leading with the indigenous knowledge rather than, you know, somebody who's just started managing that unit, hasn't lived there their whole life, etc. So that to me is a very discrete example of how I think we're making progress bit by bit.
That's a great, thank you. That's a really great example. I know Parks California is working with state parks on some of these examples, and they have an event coming up. I think Humboldt Lagoon State Park.
Mm-hmm.
The state park that's being essentially managed by the Yurok people, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a chance to go up and learn about that. And I'm hoping to go up and learn about that more in October. And then I know in Sonoma County Regional Parks, working with the local Pomo Indian tribes there, Southern Pomo and Miwok people for the management of some of their, an interpretation of their, properties. And Tole Lake is an example and so forth. So, bit by bit. Hopefully we're going to speed it all up.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're out of time, I see, unfortunately. I want to thank you, Doug, for joining us.
Sure.
Thank our audience for joining us. We have several exciting webinars coming up in addition to the replacement one scheduled for Suzanne Simard on September 14th. Our August webinar will be featuring Chris Sporer, who's the superintendent of the Santa Cruz District of State Parks, and we will be marking the 1-year anniversary of the Big Basin fire. And then moving on, we have a conversation we'll be having with some folks from REI about getting people outdoors to enjoy nature. So please join us for these events. Thank you.